Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we will study our chapter 7, that is steering system, the first part of chapter 7, the steering system. Before we proceed to the steering system, let's take a look on the basic slide of this course. We know the power flow or the powertrain of an conventional vehicle. We have an engine where the power is developed, then it is forwarded to the flywheel and then clutch. From clutch, the power goes to the gearbox, which we call as transmission. From transmission, it is transferred to the propeller shaft, and that propeller shaft carries that power to the differential box where it is distributed to the right and left wheel. So this we have covered in our previous chapters, and allied systems in which we have covered the brake, the suspension system, and now will talk about the steering system. So major parts of the steering system, we can divide the steering system in 4 major parts. First is the steering wheel, then we have steering column, steering gears, and steering linkages. Now looking at the figure, the wheel type, which is in the passenger compartment, this is your steering wheel, and this steering wheel is attached to your steering column, and steering column is having an intermediate shaft which is attached to the steering gears. Here we have the steering gears in which we have a rack and pinions steering gears, and from that rack and pinion it goes to the linkages, steering linkages, which is connected to the steering knuckle, which is at the wheel, where wheel is fixed on the steering knuckle. So and then other advancement or latest in the steering mechanism or steering system is the power steering system. If it is assisted by the hydraulic system or hydraulic power steering system, then we call that steering system as hydraulic power steering system or hydraulic assisted power steering system or power steering. In simple, it's power steering system because it is taking mechanical advantage from the fluid force. Okay, so let's study one by one. This first part I will be covering the steering wheels and the steering column. The first is the steering wheel. Now let's see what says the steering wheel. The steering wheel, which consists of a rigid rim and a number of spokes connecting the rims to a center hub, attaches to the top of the steering shaft at its center. So the steering wheel or the steering mechanism, if the first part is the steering wheel, which consists of a rigid rim and a number of spokes connecting the rim to a center hub, attaches to the top of the steering shaft at its center. Most steering wheels hubs have internal splines that fit over external splines on the steering shaft, which is from the steering column. So most steering wheel hubs have internal splines that fits over the splines on the steering shaft, which is from the steering column. A bolt or nut at the center of the hub secures the wheels to the shaft. So the bolt or nut at the center of the hub secures that wheels to the shaft, which is coming from the steering column. The steering wheel may also contains control for the cruise control and audio control, horn assembly, as well as the driver airbag. So these are the few additional things which are placed now on the steering wheel, which are the cruise control, the audio control, horn assembly, as well as the driver airbags. The most important thing is the driver airbag, which we will talk now. The airbags. An airbag is a device made of nylon cloth that is covered with neoprene. So it is a nylon device. The airbag is made of a nylon cloth that is covered with neoprene. The airbag is folded and stored in the front center of the steering wheel, means at the center of the steering wheel, which is right in front of you. The part of the steering wheel where the airbag is stored is called the inflator module. The center portion where it is stored, that portion is called as inflator module. The module also contains an igniter, the few extra things which that inflator module or that the center portion contains. That contains an igniter, a canister of flammable gas, and a member of sodium acid pellets. The sodium acid pellets burn quickly and rapidly releases the nitrogen gas while they burn, and this nitrogen gas fills the airbag. So once again, the modules also contains an igniter, the center part inflator module where we have stored the airbag. It also contains that igniter, a canister of a flammable gas, and a number of sodium acid pellets. That sodium acid pellets burns quickly. Their function is to burn quickly and produce the nitrogen gas, and that nitrogen gas, well, which we will receive from the sodium acid pellets, this nitrogen gas fills the airbag. As it inflates, the airbags tear open the module cover and spread out across the steering wheel, windshield, and dashboards within 30 to 65 milliseconds. So how quickly this nitrogen gets into the airbag, and then airbag tears the cover module, which wherever they are placed, and that cover module is bursted and from the steering wheel or windscreen shield, dashboards, and within 30 to 65 milliseconds, with fraction of milliseconds, it's deployed. Within a second of inflating, the bags deflates. So within a second of inflating, the bags also deflates. First, it inflates within this much of a milliseconds, and within a second, it deflates partially as the nitrogen gas escapes through the exhaust vents in the sides of the airbag. Once deployed, an airbag cannot be used. So question arises, when we got the inflation and it deflates, why it deflates? Because we do not want to have some that solid part in between the steering wheel and your body. We need to have some cushion, rubber for cushion type things. So that's why it deflates from your exhaust vent holes inside the airbags. Once deployed, an airbag cannot be used. So once it is used, we cannot reuse it. This is the limitation of an airbag. The module fits in the front of the nut that secures the steering wheel to the steering shaft. So that module in the inflator module in which we place the airbag and the other accessories which try to inflate the airbag are placed in the front of the nut that secures the steering wheel to the steering shaft. Bolts at the back of the steering wheels fasten the airbag module to the steering wheel. So the bolts at the back of the steering wheel fasten the airbags module to the steering wheel. Electric current is provided to the airbag through a spiral cable. So we need to ignite that sodium acid pellet. So we need an igniter and a canister. That igniter is from the electric current is provided to the airbag through a spiral cable, which is also known as clock spring or coil. The spiral cable connects to the airbag module with two wire leads. The spiral cable is tightly coiled metal strip that allows steering wheel rotation while maintaining electrical continuity. So this is like this. We have this on your figure on the left side, the 116-2. The airbags inflates at the same time the driver moves forward the steering wheel during the front end collision, and this supplements the protection of the safety. We are moving in this direction, your vehicle hits, and then we have a force of a collision. When force of collision is there, the signal goes to the airbags and it inflate. And meanwhile, due to inertia of the moment, it pushes the drivers the forward. So the airbags inflate and burst the central cover module. So it comes in between the body and the steering wheel. So how it works. Now, the airbag module attaches to the steering wheel and is removed as an assembly to service the steering wheel and column. So we have this module cover. We have this bolt cover, module mounting bolt. This is the place, and lower trim cover. Then we have this spiral cable along with its metal strip which contains the electrical connection while turning, and this is the steering column which is attached to the steering wheel. So here we have this spiral cable which is having electric current with the help of the metal strip, and that gives the igniters to ignite and functions the airbag. Now the second part is the steering column. This is how the steering columns look like. First I will read. The steering shaft links the steering wheels to the steering gear, while the column jackets, the which surrounds parts of the shaft, hold sports, bracket and switches. This steering shaft has also small intermediate section between the main section and the steering gear. So this is the steering shaft links the steering wheel to the steering gear. Here we have a steering wheel, then we have the steering shaft, and here we have a steering gears, which surrounds parts of the shaft, holds sports, bracket, and switches. So what are these? We will study. This steering shaft has a small intermediate section between the main section and the steering gear. So here we have a steering wheel. That steering wheel is attached to the steering shaft. And this steering shaft, we have a tilt lever. And this function of this tilt lever is we can move up and down the steering wheel. Okay. And then we have the switch assembly bracket here on which switches are mounted. Then this steering shaft is mounted having a sports bracket which is attached to the body of the vehicle. And then we have this column jacket in which the steering shaft is going on. And then the steering shaft and one end we have this U joint, and this U joint is connected with an intermediate section, and that other end of the shaft is connected with another U joint which is attached to the steering gears here. So let's see further elaboration of this. We have a steering wheel here on this side. Then we have turn signal, headlight dimmer, windshield wiper control mechanism here. And this is your gear shift if it is gear shift lever is here, or otherwise we have some other functions here. With this lever, then we have spacer, the wiring through, then the steering shaft splines to the steering wheel here. This is the mounting bracket of the steering shaft, the upper mounting flange. Then we have this intermediate shaft along with its silencer and seals and toe plates and holes, and intermediate shaft with U joints here and U joint here. Then we have steering gear input shaft here, which is attached with this U joint. So steering column showing all the components from the steering wheel to the steering gear. So this is how your steering column look like. Now the major components of the steering columns are, first is the steering shaft, extended from the steering wheel to the steering gear. So this complete known as the steering shaft, and this is extended from the steering wheel to the steering gear. Then we have the universal joint consisting of two yokes, which we have studied in our chapter 3, universal joints, consist of two yokes and with steel cross pipes joining them together. Then we have a flexible coupling. The rubber in a steering shaft, flexible coupling absorbs vibration and helps keeps the steering wheel from shaking. So this is the flexible coupling here. This steering shaft is coming here. Then we have this flexible coupling, and then we have this pinch bolt, and then we have the steering gear input shaft. The steering column shaft is intermediate shaft is coming, and this is fixing here in the flexible coupling. The flexible coupling is used to isolate road noise and vibration from the steering shaft. So this is the flexible coupling. The rubber in the steering shaft, flexible coupling, absorbs vibration and helps keep the steering wheel from shaking. Then we have the column cover. The steering shaft has its column cover to keep the wiring from the jacket mounted switches out of the side. We have the steering shaft going through that, and we have the wiring going through that, which the switches we have mounted on the steering wheel. So that's the column cover possesses all these things. The collapsible column. Let's see the steering column cover. The key to keeps the wiring from the jacket mounted switch in. Collapsible column during an head-on collision to absorb some of the energy of the crash and lessen the danger of injury to the driver. So we do not need a fixed or a straight rod steering shaft. We need some collapsible material there. So we have a collapsible column during an head-on collision to absorb some of the energy of the crash and lessen the danger of injury to the driver. Tilt mechanism. allows the driver to adjust the angle of a steering wheel relative to the steering column. So tilt mechanism basically is to ease the driver to adjust the steering wheel with respect to its sitting and its posture. So it allows the drivers to adjust the angle of the steering wheel relative to the steering column. Then we have a telescopic steering column. Another thing, first is the tilt mechanism, then second is the telescopic steering column. Top of the steering shaft and jacket can be pulled outward towards the driver or pushed in towards the dashboard. If we want to increase or decrease the length of the steering shaft to ease the comfort, to have some ergonomic or to have some ease in your steering mechanism, we can have this telescopic steering mechanism. Previously, in old vehicle, these two things were not there, but in all the modern vehicles, we have both this tilt mechanism and telescopic steering mechanism. Basically, it is pushing in and pulling out and pushing in the length of the steering shaft to ease the comfort for holding the steering wheel. So this is the steering shaft. A pot joint is flexible coupling used to join two shafts that allows plunging motion. So this is your steering shaft. Then we have this arrangement, spring arrangement, and this is the coupling which attached to the steering shaft. Then a typical intermediate steering shaft assembly showing a U-joint and related component. Then we have a steering shaft coming here. Then typical U-joint assembly, which we studied, and U-joint assembly is attached to the steering input gear shaft. So this is the arrangement like this. And we have studied this. This is the flexible coupling, which is in between this intermediate steering shaft and the input steering gear input shaft. So this comes to the end of our part 1 of this chapter 7, the steering system. In next chapter, we will study the rest of the parts and other assemblies regarding this. Thank you very much.